Joining us now on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Congressman, 7th District Republican Dave Brat. Dr. Brat, good to have you with us.
Great to be on, John. Thank you.
All right, we got a lot to cover in a short period of time. We have to start with immigration policy, 2 potential bills coming out of Paul Ryan allowing you to debate on. One is the, I guess, moderate bill. The other is the Bob Goodlatte bill. Both of these, the president said he would find acceptable. Where do you stand on either of these, Congressman, and what will happen with them?
Yeah, and I'll get in the weeds on these, but I always forget the first major point, and that's why do we have an immigration disaster in the first place? And that's because the Democrats won't come to the table on anything. They want open borders, cheap wages for the American worker, and that's the starting point, right? So now we have to figure out how do you pass a bill with only Republican votes because the Democrats doesn't look like they're going to come along for either of these bills. And so we have the Goodlatte bill, which is promised, which has close to 200 votes. But there's a group of the more liberal Republicans who teamed up with 200 Democrats to put in that discharge petition a few weeks ago. And so they want a bill that's even weaker than the Trump 4-pillar plan. Trump's 4-pillar plan has a few good pieces to it, but it's missing the most important part, and that's E-Verify. And E-Verify is the part which makes sure you hire legal folks. So it puts the burden on the employer. And Senator Obama was for that. Bill Clinton was for that back when the Democrats cared about the American worker and their wage rates. But now the Democrats are just doing identity politics. And so we can't get any of them to come on any bills. My Democrat is against a wall running against me. The Democrat Party is against a wall. And that's just the beginning, right? And then you have to do E-Verify and end chain migration, all that kind of thing. And so those are the 2 bills. I'm not sure either of them can get through the House this week, but we'll see.
Well, Congressman, tell us the differences between the Goodlatte bill and the, what I guess for lack of a better term, we're calling the Paul Ryan moderate bill. What are the key differences there?
Yeah, the Goodlatte bill has basically everything that will solve the immigration problem. It's well thought out policy over 30 years that Obama and Clinton, et cetera, agreed with, right? There's no right-wing stuff in here. It shouldn't be partisan. But the Democrats now aren't, the old Democrat Party JFK. They're hard-left progressives for real, right? They want open borders. And the average American does not want that. And then the second bill, the more liberal, they're calling it moderate bill, but it's a liberal. It was set up by put pressure on us to work with Democrats. And so that is kind of shaped around President Trump 4 pillars, but it weakens every one of the pillars. And, of course, the only pillar that doesn't get weakened is the total amnesty, and that's made more generous. It's up to $2 million minimum, and it's incremental, right? It's kind of set up that you get a $1.8 million amnesty right off the bat, and then a pathway to citizenship once the wall funding is actually spent. Then there's a move toward the green card, and so that's not in the Goodlatte bill. That's in the moderate liberal bill.
The moderate bill. How do they deal with the president's request to end chain migration and the visa lottery system and replace it with a merit-based, economically based, can you get a job-based platform?
Yeah, well, in the end, it doesn't do that, right? It doesn't move toward a merit-based system. The lottery piece you mentioned, they say they get rid of it. They do, but then they reclassify that whole number into a different category of visas. So it's a kind of a bait and switch. They say we're getting rid of it, but they're just giving the same amount of visa lotteries over to another program. And then what was the second part you asked me about, John? Visa lottery and the chain migration, same thing. They don't end the parental part, and there's another part. So they weaken it from getting rid of chain migration and moving toward a merit system toward just watering down the Trump plan. And by the way, the most important part is this hasn't gone to the Senate yet, right? when anything goes to the Senate, all substance falls out, as in the Obamacare debate, right? We ended up with a marketing tagline instead of a repeal of Obamacare. And so when this bill, already in a weakened form, if it ever made it to the Senate, it would come back a disaster. And again, the Democrats aren't going to vote for any of this. And if you ask, the reporters, you'll never see a question. So it's interesting the Democrats don't want to come on your show, right? Because they cannot answer questions in real time. They have to hide behind a script, give written answers that have been carefully thought out by consultants and whatever. But Democrats never come on because they cannot tell you how many folks should we let in the country. And it'll be silence. Should you build a wall? Silence. Right? What do we do with illegals? What should we do? Should we let them stay in the country and pay for them and their education and everything? Silence. Right? And so the contrast between Republicans and Democrats is just stunning. And Trump won big on this issue. I won big on this issue. It's a big deal for the average voter. In my district, I know it is. And then, up in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, et cetera. And so we're trying to help the American worker. And we also want to help the rest of the world, too, right? The reason people are leaving Honduras and Guatemala is because they don't have the rule of law.
Right.
And we do. So, of course, everyone wants to come here. But now the Democrats are moving to weaken our rule of law. Sanctuary cities is just, a total cave on the rule of law where it exists. And you're seeing the results, right? Go Google Paris and London and Netherlands, et cetera, and you have a good look at what it looks like when you give up on the rule of law in sanctuary cities.
All right. So, look, what the Democrats and some Republicans, we've got, because the Goodlatte bill is not even going to pass the House, and you have a majority there, and you have a 30-vote majority. It's not even going to pass the House. So Democrats and some Republicans, basically what they're asking for with all this outrage over the separation of minor children from their parents, of parents that have come here illegally, are basically, Congressman, they want a two-tier justice system. Right? The first tier is for U.S. citizens that don't have enough money to post bail and get big lawyers. And so they're arrested for something and they're with their children. Their children are taken from them at the point of handcuff. Their children are taken and put in to child services. Doesn't matter what the crime is. It could be a mistake. They could get expunged later. They're handcuffed. If they're minor children there, they're taken away. This is a U.S. citizen. And if they can't post bail, they sit in jail. And if they're a single parent, their children sit in child services. That's a fact, okay? That's the United States justice system. If you're enter the country illegally with minor children, by the way, taking them and putting them at risk, you break the law when you come in. If you get detained and arrested, you're separated from your minor children, just like any U.S. citizen worker. And until you can figure it out, your children are separated and put in child services. Yet the Democrats feign this unbelievable outrage over it, which is the same thing that happens in our country. So they're looking for a two-tiered system where there's no consequence for breaking the law. Final thing I want you to comment on is when I had Senator Kaine on the other day, he said, no. I'm talking about when people come for asylum. False, fake news. Because if you come for asylum and you request the asylum at the point of entry, which is the legal way to do it, you're not separated. If you come to the country and you enter it illegally, get apprehended, and at the point of apprehension say, I want asylum, you've already broken the law. So explain this explain the two-tiered system and the asylum fake news that's going on out there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you know the details on the asylum piece because that hasn't been reported because it's not in the interest of the left who owns the mainstream media. And so the major piece here that is causing confusion is the mainstream media won't acknowledge and write about the news and the facts here, and that is this law has not changed. The law goes back to the 70s and 80s. On separation, et cetera, and went through the Obama administration, et cetera. The only thing that's changed, well, there's a couple things that have changed. It used to be 90% males coming in Now that's down to 60% males, and so that changes the dynamics of who's coming in. But the most important piece is that under the Obama administration, they didn't prosecute illegal immigration. And that's why it's so important. That's why I started off emphasizing what the Democrat plan is. They don't want any border control at all. They want open borders, and their policies go along with it. So it's a misdemeanor the first time you come in. It's a felony the second time you come in illegally. The Obama administration didn't prosecute anyone. And so they're not following the rule of law, and that's what I was getting at. It's very important. If we cave on the rule of law, that it's up to the individual executive president to decide what laws you want to follow, boy, that's a new country. And so President Trump and the administration is enforcing the law. And so then you have to deal with this antiquated law that splits parents and kids, right? No one wants that, but there's ways to solve that. And the major way to solve that is to have a good immigration system. And so the Democrats always talk about all these side issues, but they won't solve the main problem, right? And they want people to do well, but they won't solve the major problems for Guatemala, Honduras. They won't put pressure on Mexico, on Mexico's southern border. And on asylum, you hit the main point. That's the main point. If you come in through a point of entry, there's no separation, there's no issue. So, and we can solve all that tomorrow, right? With the Democrats, we can change that law in the Goodlatte bill in 5 minutes. And the president said he would do that in his 45-minute news piece the other day. He said it on camera. He said, just get the Democrats in here. We could change it tomorrow morning.
Well, they don't want to change it, all right, because they don't care, because the Democrats and some Republicans are using these children for a political football in order to gain power. If they cared about the welfare of the children and not about political rhetoric to gain an advantage, they would act on it tomorrow. Pelosi and Ryan could get together and solve this in about 20 minutes. She won't do it because they don't want it solved. I mean, this is the thing. To give you an example so that everybody understands the reality of this situation. If you want to claim asylum in the United States, there's a process and a lawful way to do that. And to qualify and apply for asylum, each migrant must pass an interview by a U.S. citizenship and immigration services officer at the point of entry. Like before coming into the country illegally, you have to say, I want asylum at the border, at the point of entry. Then you'll be interviewed. Then that immigration official will determine whether or not your request is credible. All right? That's the system we have in place. If you don't like it, change it. But that's the system. Those who pass the credible fear interview will be given a chance to then apply for asylum, which is a difficult and lengthy process under U.S. law. Now, they can do that either in the U.S. while they wait or inside an immigration detention facility. If they have family in the U.S., they can be legally granted stay while their case is being adjudicated. Dave, Brat, that's the law. Why don't they follow it? If they follow it, there's no separation of children. And this other thing about children being put in cages and children taken from mothers that are breastfeeding, this is all hyperbole. It's all a lie, and it's all false, and it's not true. And so if they don't break the law, there's no separation of families. Why can't that truth be simply put out there?
Yeah, well, we're having a hard time getting it out, John, anything, because everyone always says, Dave, say this. And I'm like, to who? That's the hard part, right? So I get out on the radio. I try to get on national TV as much as I can. But let me just follow up on one thing you just said in terms about enforcement, et cetera. If you do an amnesty of 1.8 million minimum, right, that's what's coming in that moderate bill. That means immigration enforcement across the entire country is going to come to a halt, right? So if you just look at the common sense, right, for several years, every illegal alien under the age of 40 will claim to be eligible for amnesty, right, under the new moderate liberal bill, and they'll have to be given a chance to apply and have application adjudicated before they can be removed. So you got 2 million cases that will have to be adjudicated, 2 million plus. Those are just the ones that, are estimated to maybe get the amnesty. But then there'll be, double that, saying, hey, I'm going to take a chance of this. And so several million people are going to come forward, and that'll take all the resources away. And then you just sent a DACA green light to the rest of the world so folks know, hey, if you get in there, eventually you're going to be okay. And so just to let the average American know, I mean, I'm not kidding. Go Google what's going on in Europe, right? Amsterdam, Sweden, London, Paris, Spain, Italy. Go Google. Berlin. Because if you don't want that to happen here, right, if you want open borders, go take a look at what they're not even open yet, what semi-open borders look like, and you will not be happy.
And they can't put that back in the bottle now.
Nope,
I mean, that's really the issue. I mean, Berlin is going through the same thing. There's a number of political parties that have cropped up now that are starting to gain seats in the Bundestag there, and they can't stop it. Once you go down this path, you can't stop it, because once people know if I come into a country illegally, I will be safe, that is like a magnet. I mean, that is a sucking sound to get people in. And this whole thing doesn't make any sense. So if you follow the law, then you have to follow it like everybody else. If you don't, then you might get your children separated from you because you're a lawbreaker. And I get back to my argument. If you have a single father right now in the 7th District, let's say it's in Chesterfield or some part of it, this is the easiest thing to understand. They have a suspended driver's license because they have unpaid speeding tickets because they lost their job and they're now making $10 an hour and they can't pay it, but they have to drive their kids to school. And they get pulled over for going through a stop sign too fast. What happens to the 3 kids, Dave, in the back of the car? What happens?
Right. I mean, they get separated.
They get separated. They get taken to child services while the father is handcuffed, put in a squad car, and processed. Because regardless of the circumstances, he's driving, he broke the law, the minor children are separated. That is the way U.S. law works. So why are we going to now say it's fine for the guy making $10 an hour to lose his children to child services, but it isn't all right for the illegal alien who isn't even a citizen who's coming in illegally for the same thing to happen? Tell me how that math works.
No, I mean, that's what's going on. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because this is, as you said, this is the way the Democrat politics operate. They say, look at this shiny object over here. They try to get your attention on these side issues instead of looking at the elephant in the room, which is the entire immigration system is broken. And then the Democrats say, oh, we're nice, we care, we have compassion. And the Republicans do a DACA bill to help the kids, and they say no to it. They say no to the very kids they just said they want to help. And then we do DACA. Trump says, let's do 1.8 million DACA kids. And the Democrats say no to the very policy that will help the kids. And that's the only thing they were talking about before, right? Just help the DACA kid. And so then they say no. So what's really going on here is the Democrats want open borders, right? When we say we'll help the kids, they say no to it. When we say we'll shut this down tomorrow morning, they'll say, nope, we're not showing up at the bargaining table. And I think that's the key piece that voters have to say. The Democrats always shift, we're compassionate, et cetera. They're not being compassionate, right? They're saying, as politicians, we're going to sound compassionate, and you're going to pay the bill, right? And so everybody knows, right, the cheap labor crowd, the big corporations are going to get cheap labor, and who's going to pay the bill? If you got 2 kids coming into the country, it's $26,000 per year for education for those 2 kids. Who pays the bill? The taxpayer, not the big corporations. They get free education for those kids. They get the free health care. They get the free thing. They don't have to deal with overcrowded school, overcrowded health care, et cetera. And a huge proportion, by the way, just in passing of the health care mess we're currently in is due to illegals. And you'll never hear that on the mainstream press, right? So the taxpayer is very well aware of what's going on, and we just need to keep it at that high level and explain to the people that the Democrat Party, unfortunately, is no longer the party of JFK, right? They're progressive. I'm JFK, right? JFK wanted tax cuts to spur the economy. He was proud of the Catholic faith, a strong defense. And so, boy, it shows you how far the Democratic Party has moved when JFK would be considered a conservative in their party today.
Unbelievable. John Fredericks Radio Network, we're out of time. More information, go to davebrat.com.